Hello, and thank you for joining us for the Bridge to Brotherhood Volunteer Role webinar. My name is Mackenzie Lalka, and I serve AK Psi as the Associate Director of Education. I'll be your webcast producer. Before we dive into the content, I would like to review the web-based features available to you. This webinar will be advanced remotely, but at the bottom of your screen, there are multiple application widgets you can use throughout the program. Additionally, each of the windows on your screen are also able to be resized, moved around, and adjusted to fit your individual learning need. A copy of the slide deck and a few other additional materials are available in the resource list widget that looks like a green folder. All resources for Bridge to Brotherhood, however, are also available on the website at myaksi.org/bridge. The group chat is available for you to interact with other attendees and the presenters during the presentation. When posting, it will share your first name and last initial, but if you also want to share your volunteer role in the chapter or chapters that you advise. If you have any technical difficulty throughout the webcast, please go ahead and click on the Help widget. It has a question mark icon and will cover most common technical issues. If you have a question throughout the program, go ahead and launch the Q&A widget to submit your question, but all questions will be asked and answered at the end of the program in the order they are received. During this webinar, we will cover an overview of the volunteer's role in Bridge to Brotherhood, Alpha Kappa Psi's new pledge education program. This webinar will not focus on the specifics of program structure or the content, but is instead going to focus on the role of volunteers in the process and how you can assist chapters through the transitional period. It is encouraged for all volunteers to also view the Bridge to Brotherhood overview webinar in addition to this one to gain the best understanding of the program. At this point, I'm going to go ahead and pass it off to Greg.
Before touching on the changes in the program and how it affects your role as volunteers, I want to quickly talk about why we are changing the pledge process. Alpha Kappa Psi is constantly reviewing its programs and events to ensure the quality of the programming and education suits the needs of its members and keeps up with the changing needs of both higher education and corporate industries. The fraternity's goal is always to enhance the membership experience and ensure all student members are provided with the knowledge, skills, and abilities to stay competitive in a workplace and an ever-changing higher education environment. As the start of the student member experience, the pledge education experience is no exception to this rule. The fraternity's board of directors instructed the Heritage Center and the management team to review Alpha Kappa Psi's pledge program after the chapter Congress passed a resolution to do so at the 2015 convention in Norfolk, Virginia. Fraternity staff and volunteers spent nearly 2 years researching and developing the program before piloting a year to get additional feedback on implementation. With the focus on Alpha Kappa Psi, key practices and skills, the new pledge education program starts to close the skills gap and prepare members for a successful life beyond college. The introduction to key skills will allow pledges to start their memberships a step ahead of the game, ready to use their new knowledge and engage in chapter activities to further their professional development. By following the program, the opportunity for hazing, over-programming, and other risk management issues is greatly reduced. Minimizing these opportunities would increase early burnout, which will increase engagement and retention in the chapter. With better retention, combined with the knowledge of our key skills, members will be better prepared to focus on stronger chapter programming and education. With more time and better resources to focus on the member experience at the chapter level, the hope is that the student experience will hold a deeper value, which will create a stronger bond to the organization as a whole. If implemented correctly, the fraternity will continue to push the boundaries of the value offered to our members and continue to meet its vision of being the premier developer of principal business leaders. Since the program is delivered by the students, there are not a lot of responsibilities for volunteers regarding the pledge program. From a high-level perspective, volunteers need to understand the program, its content, and delivery so you can best coach your students and other volunteers through the process. With the program being new to everyone, it will likely take time for both students and volunteers to become comfortable with new lessons and activities. So don't be afraid to ask us for any questions that you might have. If you have any questions, your students and volunteers will likely have similar questions. Since chapter advisors have more day-to-day interaction with the students and officers, they should review the facilitator's guide and know the lesson plans well enough to answer questions the fraternity educator may have about a specific activity and what it means. Section directors and regional directors who are more removed from the day-to-day operations of specific chapters should know the deadlines of the program and be able to follow up with the volunteers in their region to ensure they are on track and don't have concerns. For all volunteer roles, we want to ensure we are equipping our students with the knowledge and ability to do their roles and encouraging them to take the lead. Keep in mind as we walk through the rest of the volunteer touch points, and how you can best empower your students and volunteers to fulfill their duties in the role. Throughout the pledge process and academic year, fraternity educators have their hands in a number of administrative reports, such as submitting the program syllabus prior to the start of the program and reporting their pledges and initiatives. As volunteers, it is important to ensure your students are completing these reports in a timely manner. While they may not see the importance of submitting them ahead of time, remind them of the implications if they don't. For example, not submitting the program syllabus, which we'll touch on next, will impact their ability to conduct electives. Not reporting pledges and initiatives within the 7 days impacts both billing and shipping, which can impact their financial statements and when they receive their initiation certificates. Again, your role is not to complete the reports for them, but ensure they understand that they need to be done and follow up to ensure that they are done at the appropriate time.
As Greg just mentioned, so the program syllabus is a new component of the pledge program that's very important chapters complete and for them to do so on time. The program syllabus is how each chapter is going to report the dates of their pledge meetings and rituals, their elective choices, and a few other administrative details. This form is completed in Smarter Select, which is the same program where chapters complete the Chapter Success Plan, so they do not need to make their own forms. Unlike the Chapter Success Plan, however, it is not being assigned to the chapter, since they will be able to submit it multiple times throughout the year for each different pledge process. So they will need to ensure that they access the form through the link in the facilitator guide and submit it through their chapter account. Any syllabuses that are submitted under a non-chapter account are not going to be accepted. As much as the program syllabus is for the students to help them plan their pledge process, it's also important for Heritage Center staff and volunteers to understand what each chapter is doing in their program and where we can assist them. Knowing when your chapter is having their meetings and rituals, as well as if they're doing any larger scale electives such as a business plan or a case competition, can help you guys plan your chapter visits. Knowing in advance if a chapter isn't starting their pledge process until later in the semester can also help avoid over-communication if we haven't seen a pledge or initiate report come in. Lastly, having the information on what chapters are doing and when can help us provide our students with better resources and to share the accomplishments with their campuses and communities. Since we want to encourage chapter officers to select the dates of their meetings and the electives that work best for their chapter, your role as a volunteer should be to review the program syllabus from the lens of understanding what they want to accomplish and to help them get there. What this means is if a chapter selects an elective that you don't think they should be choosing, instead of just rejecting the syllabus, we want you to open a dialogue to determine why they chose that elective and what they hope to gain from it. Voice your concerns and see how they respond. If they're trying to do an activity that steps outside of the guidelines or parameters for the length of the program, however, you do want to go ahead and correct that in advance. Otherwise, we want you to empower them to see what they can do. A number of chapters have expressed concern about completing the program syllabus for the upcoming fall term. With the timeline of when we were able to release the program materials, the program syllabus for fall 2018 is not going to be due until July 15th, which gives chapters a little bit over a month to complete this. It's not required for them to seek a chapter vote, but we do strongly encourage chapters to consult their membership before making a final decision on the components of the program. Since it is summer and many students are going to be away from campus, go ahead and encourage your chapter officers to reach out to the membership through email, through conference calls, social media, or any other kind of methods of communication they have to talk about the new program prior to the deadline. As we touched on in the opening, the Bridge to Brotherhood program was designed to enhance how the fraternity delivers consistent education. The fraternity has spent years of research determining the skill sets needed in the workforce and identifying what was being addressed in our previous programming and what fell to the wayside. Now these skill sets are being woven throughout the pledge process and into membership, starting with the educational modules. Each of the modules are only about an hour in length, so it is important to keep in mind that pledges are not going to become experts in each subject. The modules merely provide a baseline level knowledge for them to build upon throughout the rest of their pledge process and as they continue into membership. As volunteers, you do not need to attend the educational modules unless you're concerned that they're not delivering them correctly. Your role with this component of the program should be to ensure that the fraternity educator feels confident with the material and the lesson plans to deliver it themselves. As some of the topics are going to be newer elements for our members that they may not be as well versed in yet, such as servant leadership or emotional intelligence, we have created Pinterest boards with links to resources from the industry experts. Fraternity educators, the pledges, and yourselves can use these resources to refresh and enhance your knowledge before delivering the modules, or if the students don't feel confident leading the discussions themselves, they can even utilize some of these videos during the module to help guide the conversation. While chapters can use these resources to help during the module, We do want chapters to follow the lesson plans as they are, and they should not be amending the activities or using activities similar to accomplish a similar outcome. There's a number of activities that you can do to accomplish similar goals, but to ensure that we are providing quality assurance in our programming and the ability to assess learning outcomes of the program, we need all chapters to follow the lesson plans as prescribed. Chapters will have the ability to provide feedback and suggestions at the end of each pledge process in regards to the timing of the activities and the specific activities themselves, which will be reviewed on an annual basis. You'll see from looking at the content of the modules, they cover both fraternal and professional development topics. However, to maximize the benefits of the pledge program, fraternity education is the pledge's responsibility to learn outside of the modules. To keep the program engaging and make the most of the time the officer has with the pledge class, the modules are designed to be interactive and engaging rather than lecture-based. For that reason, chapters should not be requiring their pledges to take quizzes on fraternal information or about chapter members. Resources are available, such as a study guide and practice quizzes, for the pledges to use and prepare for the exam on their own. Many chapters are concerned that this may not be enough time for the pledges to pass the exam at the halfway point, but I do want to assure you that through the pilot phase, most of the pledges had no problem passing at this point in the process. When it comes time to take the exam, chapters should proctor the exam in a lab-like environment. So this means they can either utilize a campus computer lab, or you can allow your pledges to bring in their own laptops. The fraternity educator will then share the link and password and should monitor the pledges to ensure that they're not opening additional web browsers. Chapters are not going to be sent the scores once the pledge completes the exam, so the pledges will need to let a member of the Pledge Education Committee know when they finish and to share their score with them. With the transition to the online exam, there's also been a lot of concern about not being able to recite the Creed and Anthem, which prompted the verbal component for the exam. As verbal recitation is likely going to be a little bit more difficult, pledges do have the entire duration of the pledge process to pass this component. Chapters can decide whether or not to set specific days where officers are available to hear the recitations, or they can allow pledges to individually schedule a time with an officer when they're ready. Just like the fraternal exam, however, pledges can redo the verbal component as many times as it takes for them to pass, and they only need to redo the portion that they miss. So for example, if they say the Creed correctly but mess up on the anthem, they do not need to redo the Creed as well, just the anthem. Public speaking may not be a strength of every pledge, so chapters should not make this a very intimidating hurdle to cross. There's going to be a rubric available in the facilitator guide that members of the Pledge Education Committee can use to mark the areas of the Creed and Anthem that the pledge may have struggled with to provide them feedback, and they should just use their best judgment on whether or not they know the Anthem and Creed well enough to pass. We want to be conscious of any disabilities, so if a pledge continues to struggle with this component, officers should make sure to talk to them and see how they can best support the individual pledge. As brothers, we don't want to be looking for ways to remove a pledge from the process, but instead looking for ways how we can help them obtain the goal of obtaining membership.
Next, let's talk about the rituals. The pledge process still incorporates the rituals which our fraternity was built upon, just in an updated and refreshed. Induction and initiation have not changed and are still the same rituals chapters should be conducting at the beginning and end of the pledge process, respectively. The noticeable changes are in the midterm interview and court of honor presentation. As discussed in the overview webinar, the midterm interview is a professional interview where pledges will receive feedback on their interview performance. This isn't a major change from what most chapters were doing in the past, but now there are more guidelines to help deliver constructive feedback, mitigate risky questions, and ensure pledges feel prepared, which creates a productive learning environment. Court of honor, on the other hand, has been changed to a group presentation. The reason for this change is to give pledges a better opportunity to reflect on their experiences, as well as the opportunity to experience a different type of interview. Many companies are now including presentation aspects to their interview process, and giving pledges this opportunity to practice public speaking as well as teamwork will increase their confidence and ability to succeed in those types of settings. Both the midterm interview and court of honor presentation have a rubric available in the facilitator guide for chapters to use as a guide for evaluation. Chapters can utilize this form or digitize it in a Google form as long as the pledge class is aware of how they're going to be evaluated and receives the feedback individually after the rituals. As volunteers, we understand you have busy lives, and as with the educational modules, it's not a requirement to attend any of the fraternity rituals unless an issue has been identified that necessitates a volunteer being present. If you have the ability, however, we highly recommend it to both show support for the chapter and ensure they're following all guidelines. Your main role as it comes to rituals is to touch base with the fraternity educator and the master of rituals to ensure they understand the changes to the rituals and how to execute them. It may take a few semesters for chapters to get comfortable with the new format of Court of Honor in particular, so be patient and help guide them in the right direction. While the Pledge program allows the fraternity to deliver consistent education, chapters are still able to tailor the program based on their campus and the needs of their members. There are certain things that cannot be changed, such as the educational modules or the rituals, but they have the freedom in a few other ways. Institution-specific modifications are a way for the fraternity to address anything a campus community might require a student organization to do. Most of the institutional changes we saw in the Pledge programs revolved around length, so that should be addressed with a 5 to 8 week structure. But if one of your chapters has any other requirements from the university that the program is not in compliance with, please let us know and we will definitely work to accommodate it. We're a guest on the university campuses, so we will always work to accommodate the university's needs and expectations above our own requirements. Aside from institution changes, chapters have the ability to decide whether or not they would like their Pledge class to elect a liaison to the chapter, what elective add-ons they want to supplement the program, and what type of interviews, if any, they want the pledges to conduct with the Brotherhood. If chapters choose to include brother interviews as a part of the program, they are only able to do one option. They may not do both formal and informal or do a combination of the two. The number of interviews prescribed in the guidelines are the maximum amount of interviews accepted by the program length and may not be increased no matter the chapter size. If a chapter has fewer than the maximum number allowed, they can simply allow interviews with their entire chapter, but may not make up the difference by including alumni or faculty members in that process. Now, there is still the ability for chapters to include alumni interviews as a part of the program through the alumni interview elective, but the brother interviews are solely with members of the current collegiate chapter. The volunteer's role as it comes to program modifications is to merely be aware. As mentioned with the institution-specific changes, simply be aware they exist and ensure your chapter is following up with the Heritage Center to make those changes. The Pledge Class Liaison, elective options, and brother interviews are all recorded in the program syllabus, so when you're reviewing that, you'll be able to keep track of what your chapters are doing and follow up throughout the program to ensure they're following what they agreed to on the syllabus. While the Pledge process is first and foremost an opportunity for growth and should be treated as a learning experience, there are going to be instances where a pledge is not performing according to expectations or is exhibiting behavior that's not tolerated in the organization. In these cases, chapters should act as servant leaders to start a conversation and determine the reason for the behavior and give the pledges the opportunities to improve before looking to remove them from the process. But that doesn't mean that removal is not an option. It's crucial when discussing a pledge's performance to foster an open dialogue and receive feedback from the pledge to determine whether the pledge was given the tools and resources necessary to be successful in the program. When attempts to improve performance are not successful through discussion alone, the use of a performance improvement plan should be considered. The performance improvement plan, which was designed based off resources from the Society for Human Resource Management, also known as SHRM, is an opportunity to give struggling pledges the ability to succeed while still holding them accountable for past performance. A performance improvement plan plays a vital role in correcting performance discrepancies, but it should not be used as a disciplinary mechanism. It should be used as a tool to monitor and measure the unmet expectations or undesired behaviors of a pledge to improve performance or modify behavior. After a performance improvement plan has been issued, chapter officers should continue to communicate with the pledge. If they do not improve after issuing the improvement plan, there should be another conversation with the pledge and the big brother to understand why the pledge failed to meet the expectations. There are any number of reasons why the pledge could have failed to successfully complete the improvement plan, including a failure on our part to properly equip them with the information and resources they need to be successful. But the key is to ask first. It should be made clear upon administering the improvement plan if removal is a potential consequence for not successfully completing the plan. If, after the conversation, the pledge has no desire to meet the program's expectations or change his or her behavior, then that would be a reason to remove the pledge from the program. We always recommend to our students to reach out to the regional management team and the resource coordinator to not only make you aware of the situation, but to also ask for your counsel and advice on the situation. Except in extreme circumstances, such as an issue with the law or university, a pledge should never be disciplined or removed from the program without a prior discussion and the opportunity to improve. As volunteers, you should never be blindsided when a pledge is removed from the process or an incident occurs. For chapter advisors specifically, you should work to develop a strong enough relationship with a chapter that they feel comfortable coming to you when problems arise with a pledge and discussing the situation. In some cases, you may be able to provide a different perspective and guidance on how to handle the situation. If a performance improvement plan is needed, you can also help the officers determine what one might look like based on the current situation. Section directors and regional directors should also be familiar with the structure of the improvement plans to provide guidance to chapter advisors when they may not feel comfortable advising on the current situation.
A lot of chapters may be wondering with the new process how it is going to affect the recruitment, how it is going to affect their recruitment and ability to continue bringing in new members. If chapters sold your pledge program as a key feature, they can still do the same with the new program. Student chapters should still hold informational sessions and events to promote the chapter as they always have, and they still need to follow all risk management policies and guidelines. Chapters should be open about the pledge process and its expectations, but should not just aim to sell the benefits of pledging. Chapters should focus their efforts on selling the benefits of membership in the chapter and the fraternity as a whole. During recruitment, chapters should hold sufficient opportunities to meet all potential new members. Through these interactions, brothers should get to know the potential members well enough to understand their intentions for joining the organization and if they will uphold the values of our fraternity. It is important to remember that individuals joining our organization do not need to have all of the qualities of a strong member to start, but merely the desire and drive to become a principal business leader. The path to principal business leadership does not end with when you complete the pledge process. The quality of membership stems from the ability of chapters to provide continual learning and growth opportunities throughout the entire membership experience. As always, a chapter should not offer bids to individuals which they are not confident will positively represent the fraternity, but those individuals who will demonstrate the qualities we aspire to be as brothers of Alpha Kappa Psi. With a lot of changes to assist the transition to the Bridge to Brotherhood, not all chapters are expected to begin using the program right away. If you're in Area 1 or Area 4, your chapters will start following the program this upcoming term in fall 2018, but Areas 2 and 3 will not transition until fall 2019. Any chapters that were on the pilot program, regardless of what area they're in, will start following the program this fall as written. For the chapters in Area 2 and 3, the resource coordinators will be reviewing your current programs and providing advice on how to ease the transition over the next year.
All right, so at this point, we are going to transition to you guys' questions. As stated earlier, you can launch the Q&A widget from the menu dock to go ahead and submit your questions. This feature is going to remain open even in on-demand viewing, so if we don't get to your question or you have a question when you're watching this at a later point, go ahead and submit it and we will go ahead and respond via email. We've only received about one question so far, so be sure to ask us whatever questions you guys have about your role and about the program. But we'll go ahead and start with that one question we have here. So if a chapter has not yet finalized their fall schedule, are they able to submit a preliminary syllabus by the due date and then update it later?
That is an excellent question. So understanding that with the announcement of the program that was in May, and then understanding they quickly go into summer break and the due date is July 15th, yes. So they can go ahead and complete the syllabus to the best of their knowledge. With the ideal dates for what their program is, understanding that it might have to be adjusted based on if the chapter can get room reservations or if they need to accommodate the university schedule. So yes, they can submit the preliminary one on July 15th, and then should they have updates or need to adjust or amend their program syllabus, then they can let you as the advisor know and also let their resource coordinator know so we can make the appropriate adjustments.
All right, so we have another question here. So if you're a volunteer in areas 2 or 3 and your chapter wants to start following the Bridge program early, are they able to do so?
Great question, and yes, they are. One of the caveats, though, is because they won't be in the initial wave of chapters, it may still require some effort on their end to get the actual the fraternal exam and some of the other materials, just because we'll need to make sure the resource coordinator is aware. So if the chapter decides to do so, they need to make sure they follow the deadline and that they inform the resource coordinator and their regional director, as long as they all agree. The chapters, both agree to do that. But outside of that, yes, chapters are allowed to adopt the program early. I would say certain chapters may want to wait and understand it greater, especially larger chapters, so that it doesn't impact their pledge class. But a chapter that thinks it can be ready in time certainly can.
I would also go ahead and add on to that. If they are kind of wanting to get interested in starting to implement it, but are don't want to go ahead and do it fully, encourage them to just kind of look at the elements of the program and what they might be able to start incorporating now. So for example, what activities do they have that are already in the elective bank that they can see that how they can match the guidelines and how they may be able to better align that there. All right, so the next question kind of is the flip side of that. So if a chapter is required to start the program this fall, but as the advisor, they don't believe that they're equipped to start soon, are they able to request a delay in implementing the program?
We don't really want to do a delay. What we'd rather you do is, if you think that you're in a position now, to go ahead and reach out to us and your regional director, and let's work on a strategy to get you there. The transition to the program is actually not as challenging as a lot of people may think it is. It seems like a very, very large change only because it's a cultural change from how we have done pledge education in Alpha Kappa Psi before. But on the whole, if you were following PEP before, the Bridge Brotherhood is not that much fundamentally different than PEP. It's just about the actions and the pieces and the components. So if you do feel or you do find that your chapter thinks it may not be ready in time, have them go ahead and reach out to the education at aksi.org address and their regional director or section director, depending on the region and how you're structured. And we'll definitely be able to help you guys get it put into a place where it'll be workable before you start the school year.
All right, so next question we have is, so what if a chapter brings up a pledge at a meeting and the membership votes them out without an improvement plan, and the CA, SD, or RD of the chapter is subsequently informed and is taken off guard? How should they kind of handle that situation?
That's also a great question. So to address this at a deeper level, chapters do have, per the governing documents, the ability to remove a pledge without an action plan. That's just as written in the governing documents, the way that they can do it. It's not the way that we're trying to address issues. Should there be an issue with the pledge, we do prefer for them to issue an improvement plan, have a conversation, and explain to the pledge the gaps and maybe preferences and what their expectations are, or gaps in acceptable behavior. But if they do remove a pledge, I think that's the perfect opportunity to have a coaching situation to say, okay, so why did you think this action was necessary? Why could it not have been resolved through an action plan or improvement plan? And then express, I'm at a loss for words, but express the importance of keeping you all in contact with them as they go through these situations. So something that could happen is that they remove a pledge for a reason that's really not appropriate, and then it becomes a bigger issue than it really necessarily needed to be. So yes, you can remove a pledge technically without an improvement plan. It's technically okay per the governing documents, but if that does happen, if you are caught off guard, I definitely recommend opening up a conversation, explaining to them why maybe that's not appropriate, especially relating it back to a professional setting. They usually are given an improvement plan and the opportunity, or at least you're made aware of the issues, and then hopefully that changes the behavior the next time.
All right, so next question we have here is about the brother interviews. So are brother interviews, that's the formal and informal options, a part of the elective bank, or is it in addition to? As well as how many electives are allowed?
So it is in addition to, we did not make you choose between the elective bank and that. So if you choose between the formal and informal interviews, you can only choose one of the two. And then you may choose from the elective bank based on a credit hour system. The way the credit hour system is configured is each elective takes up so much time, so it counts for, therefore, so many credit hours. Based on the number of weeks that you select for your program, you're allotted so many credit hours. So chapters are allowed to choose as many electives as they would like to, up to the amount of credit hours that are listed in the program for the number of weeks of their pledge program. I know that sounds slightly complex, but when you see it in the documents, it's actually laid out fairly simple in a nice infographic for us. But they are both separate.
Looks like we don't have any additional questions at this point. So as well, we will open up to, if you have any more questions, go ahead and get those in right now. But otherwise, Greg, Liz, do you guys have any kind of final pieces of advice, thoughts, whatnot for volunteers as they're kind of going through this transition?
Like we said earlier for the chapter advisors, if you encounter any issues, don't feel comfortable, have questions, that email address is going to be the fastest way next to calling the Heritage Center or reaching out to me directly. But if you get the education@aksi.org email address, a lot of times you're going to get a very, very quick response. And it's definitely going to be the best way for us to get your feedback as you face different challenges implementing the program. But we are definitely here to support you.
All right, we did get a few questions in, so I'll go ahead and address those real quick. First one is, are chapters not using the ritual book anymore for the midterm interview and court of honor? I will actually go ahead and answer that one. So currently, no. So we have taken, since they are not the same rituals that are currently in the ritual book, we do have the guidelines currently in the facilitator guide. So all of the text of what people are going to be saying throughout the ritual is in the appendix of the facilitator guide. And as we're transitioning everybody over to Bridge to Brotherhood, they're going to follow that instead of what is in the ritual book. And the other one goes back to the interview selection. So if a chapter selects the alumni interview elective, can they include faculty advisors in this option?
As long as it's in the spirit of the elective and the elective definitions don't restrict you from that, I'm sure. We've written out the electives pretty clearly to allow, I'm going to say, some wiggle room as in to interpret some of the instructions. So I don't see any problem with the faculty advisor being a part of the interview, as long as they adhere to the same rules anybody else who would participate in that elective would have to adhere to.
All right. Since it looks like we're not getting any additional questions in anymore, we'll go ahead and end the webinar early for you guys. Just a reminder that, again, the Q&A widget will remain open after the webinar is ended if you're watching it again at a later point, or you can always email education@aksi.org or bridge@aksi.org for any follow-up questions. I'd like to thank you all guys for attending today and all your guys' questions in the comments. I strongly encourage, again, you guys to view the Bridge to Brotherhood overview webinar, which covers a more in-depth the changes of the content and the structure. Additionally, I would like to thank Greg and Liz for their insight and expertise today, and thank you all for joining us.